give them a chance to kind of finish the conversation and then come again with it. I want you to look at two other scripture passages with me. If you want to open your Bibles to these or just listen to these, I want to read to you from Matthew 17:2 and then from Daniel chapter 7 verses 13 and 14. John's description of the Son of Man, what he saw, is not new, is what I'm wanting to point out to you. In Matthew 17:2, he says this is talking about Jesus, he was transformed in front of them, and his face shone like the sun, even his clothes became as white as the light. And then in Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, it says, I continued watching in the night visions, and I saw one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was escorted before him. He was given authority to rule and glory and a kingdom, so that those of every people, nation, and language should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will not be destroyed. You have in those particular passages something similar to what you see John experiencing in that vision of the Son of Man. And I just wanted to point that out to you to help you see that this wasn't anything new. This is something that has been seen before in a description of the Son of Man. So I want to share one thing with you out of this study guide that I'm using. It said Revelation 1 ends with the directive to John to write what you've seen, what is, and what will take place after this. Some take the three phrases as a matrix for the dispensations of world history and church history. Others interpret it simply as John's recording the divine revelation that was being given to him.
Amen.
In either case, Jesus directs for this apocalyptic vision to be recorded for the rest of the church, so that the churches, both the specific 7 to receive the letters and the church universal, would benefit from God's gracious self-revelation to us. So it's for all of us to hold this. So, and also that he holds the keys of death and Hades. It's really a way of telling us that nothing is outside of Jesus' sovereignty. He's over it all. He's the Alpha, the Omega. He holds the keys. Nothing is beyond his sovereignty. He knows everything, and he is controlling everything. All right, let's move to chapter 2 then, and begin with the churches themselves. I want to show you, if I can get it to come up here, and I believe it's on the bottom rack on that side, the light switch for this. There are so many things that we could share with you about Ephesus, but the temple of Artemis, I'm trying to get my screen back on now and get around where I can read it. There it is. Okay. And I'm going to try to get this going. I don't want to blast y'all out. Look. Guess what? I can't go beyond that plug, can I?
David may need to move.
Give you a moment to. This is one of the 7 wonders of the world, and it was at Ephesus.
We are at Ephesus, at the
site of the great Artemisian or temple area of Artemis. It's nothing but a swamp now, mostly. You can see one end here behind that bush area there, and then you see this rectangular depression in the ground, and that is actually the area of the great Artemisian, probably running past that bank there, but it was a huge temple in ancient times. The people that are walking around the only path that's dry. It just helps you to get around to see the one column that archaeologists have been able to erect just to give you an impression of the grandeur and size of this great temple of Artemis. But this is the one reconstructed column to show you the great size of this great Artemisian here in Ephesus. If you recall, it was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world because of its grandeur and size. And of course, Paul encountered the silversmiths union there in Ephesus, who were part of a riot that was instigated by Demetrius, one of the silversmiths, who was responsible for making the shrines to Artemis, and his business had been severely impacted by Paul's preaching. And so the worship that took place in this great temple, which is now just a rectangular marshy area that is silted up over the centuries, Paul the apostle had a great ministry and was able to impact Demetrius' business of selling silver shrines to Artemis. And there was an ensuing riot which took place in the theater, went into the theater.
Why don't you look at the size of that theater?
Mob for about 2 hours, Luke says, just constantly were chatting, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. And Luke says, without really knowing why there was a disturbance, but they certainly were going to rally around the great Artemis. And this is all that remains of that temple here in Ephesus.
Okay, that tells you a little bit. It doesn't tell you everything about Ephesus. Okay, if we can get that light back on, it'll be helpful to me, Matt. Ephesus was quite a city. It was a cultural city. Of course, it had the worship of false gods, certainly, but it was a great trading city, a wealthy city, and it was the first of those in that list of churches and that circular route of the churches that would receive letters from John as God had given them to him here. So let's just begin. To the angel of the church in Ephesus write, the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and who walks among the 7 gold lampstands says. Now, stars, the leadership, the pastor, and the one who's walking among the 7 gold lampstands, that's God himself, says that. So he's telling who he's writing to the leadership of the churches. So he's writing to the churches, and he's the one walking. So it's God who's saying this. Verse 2 begins what he has to say to them. I know your works, your labor, and your endurance, and that you cannot tolerate evil. You have tested those who call themselves apostles and are not, and you have found them to be liars. You also possess endurance and have tolerated many things because of my name, and have not grown weary. But I have this against you. And then he tells, and we'll get to that in just a minute. You're going to find in the letters to these churches a structure that's going to be the same for each of them. First of all, the address of who is writing, who's saying this, and who he's writing to. To the angel of the church in, and he'll name the city. Then you're going to see the identification. Thus says, and there's going to be different phraseology, but it's all alluding to the Son of Man. He's the one who's being identified as the one speaking. And then the account of what he sees going on there. I know your works. There are going to be minor variations of how that's said, but to each of the churches it's going to be the same pattern that you find. And then the assessment of what he sees. But I've seen this, but I. And this is a first person assessment. But what other assessment do you need when it's coming to God giving you the assessment? You don't call in other witnesses. He is the final witness, isn't he?
Amen.
And then there's the exhortation to remember. And it will be imperative verbs that are given there. And then the promise, the one who conquers, to the one, in other words. And then the call, let the one who has an ear to hear, let him hear. That's going to be the structure of each of the letters. Just know that it follows this outline given to Ephesus initially, and then to each of the churches. What is it that he is seeing there? Have I given you Ephesus yet? You have that on the back of
On the back of the map.
Map, right. Okay, I thought you did. Look at that on the back of your map. How is Christ described in these verses? Well, he's the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and who walks among the 7 golden lampstands, isn't he? That's how he's described. This was the same description that was given to John with the Son of Man vision that he saw. What do we know about the city? Well, some of you read that study guide. What did you learn about the city of Ephesus as you read that? Anything in particular that stands out to you?
Well, it was a free city, that there were not Roman soldiers monitoring it.
There was what now?
It was said it was a free city and that the Roman soldiers did not monitor it.
Okay, a free city. Soldiers didn't monitor what went on there. It was a major city in trade in that southeastern portion of Asia. It was a very important city of that day by evidence of this, one of the 7 wonders of the world being there. I mean, not every city had something like that, but this was a major, even though it was to a false god, it was a major place of worship. And did you see the size of that amphitheater? Can you imagine filling that up for people to speak? And you didn't have a sound system back in those days. Of course, an amphitheater would help carry the sound. But when you look at the size of that place, it was a massive structure. It lets you know, again, something of the size of the city and the kind of gatherings that they would have there. This would be a major place for gathering in that city.
Brother William, didn't they export fine wool, fine cloth or something?
It was a major place of export, yes. Purple?
Yeah, I think.
Well, the dye purple.
That's it. That's right.
Which was rare, it was an expensive dye, was exported from there. Anything else that you noted about the city?
I thought it was interesting that the temple was a refuge place for felons or what people who committed crime.
Okay,
Asylum.
sort of a safe haven for them. Okay, for people who'd committed crimes. By safe haven, they could come there, be protected until they could have a trial. It didn't keep them from having to pay for the crime if they were guilty, but it did give them a safe haven to come to for protection, protection until they could be tried. Anything else about the city?
I don't know if it was mentioned in the study guide, but I know from studying myself that Christians that lived there were heavily persecuted by the non-Christians.
So true. It was a place of great persecution, and that's the reason part of the commendation that we read about was for their faithfulness in hanging in there. How did he put it? I know your works, your labor, your endurance, and that you cannot tolerate evil. You've been tested, and you've tested those who call themselves apostles and are not. You also possess endurance and have tolerated many things because of my name. That's the persecution that you were talking about. Because of my name, and have not grown weary. They have hung in there in spite.
Yeah. But, isn't that something? You've done all of these things,
Right.
but the major thing you have fallen away from.
Right.
And I wonder if we are not guilty of that in our churches today.
Can be. These were the things that he's commending them for.
And was this in the first century?
Yes, right. We're in the first century.
Do you think there's a lot of art and culture and stuff there?
Definitely it was that kind of city. Yes. Anything else you note about the city that grabbed your attention? As you were sharing about the fact that, I mean, Christians were they were not a major presence in the city. There were Christians there, but they were being persecuted.
Oh, it had a lot of idols?
There were a lot of idols there. This Artemis, this temple to the false god of Artemis, was a tremendous place of gathering for false worship. So Christians were up against the culture of the day. They were up against the norm. They were fighting against the norm to do that which was right.
Brother William, who destroyed that temple? Did it finally just...
Christians did in 401.
Okay? All right. Christians did in 401.
Brother, I didn't ask her anything. I was asking...
Well, I'm glad
And then when Constantine redid the city, he did not build the temple back
Right.
because he was a Christian by then.
Right. It's interesting about Constantine's profession.
It is.
He wanted everybody to be a Christian. He had all the soldiers come down to the water and they were all baptized, one after the other. We're going to make you a Christian whether you want to be or not.
Soldiers.
You're either a Christian or you're getting ready to go to hell. One or the other.
It's interesting also that Constantine thought you could only have one mistake after you became a Christian that you could be forgiven for, and after that you had it. There was no hope for you.
It was tough.
That was the thing that was interesting to me. So Constantine wanted it to be toward the end of life for people to accept Christ, so that if they made one mistake, they'd have that one chance, and then they'd be all right. I don't know where you got all of that from. That was Constantine.
That's kind of like that little boy out in the back preaching. He's preaching, didn't have nobody in his congregation except one old cat. He got through preaching, he grabbed that cat and put it in a tub of water. And his mama come running out there and said, "You can't put that cat on the water." He said, Well, I baptized him. If he's gonna be a member of my church, he's gonna be baptized.
Have you ever tried to put a cat in a tub of water?
Ready.
No. That's not easy to do. Okay, so there are some things that he compliments them on this. And when you look at those compliments, quite a description. The ma'am? Oh, yes, excuse me. Maybe squealing on you. Now, get the buzzing off anyway. Thank you, I forgot to go turn it off.
2016.
The work of Jesus is not something separate from the church. He holds us in his right hand and walks among us. He's intimately involved in the work, with the leaders as well as the church, church itself. And his self-revelation is one that would encourage them in spite of what he's going to be sharing about them. Now, question said, he's aware of their lives. He's talking about the things that they're doing, your works, your labor, your endurance. It's interesting that this triplet description that's given, he's aware that they had exerted much effort, and the works is indicating this effort that they had exerted in the doing of life and of ministry. And then their labor and endurance provided the two sides of the coin of their work.